Xerox had the modern computer years before Apple and Windows and didn't do anything with it. At first glance, it seems crazy. We're talking about a computer with actual graphics and not just text. A mouse, digital documents you could edit on screen, the kind of machine that would go on to define the next 50 years of technology. And they had it, sitting there, in the 1970s. So what happened? Why build something that important and then just not pursue it? And the strange part is, they understood what they had. They saw it, they tested it, and then they made a decision that, at the time, well, it actually kind of made perfect sense. By the early 1970s, Xerox wasn't trying to find its next move. It had already found it, the photocopier. Before Xerox, copying a document was slow and messy. It involved using carbon paper, chemicals, and pretty complicated processes. But Xerox made it really simple. You just pressed the button and got a perfect copy. That idea alone turned them into a massive business. But the real breakthrough wasn't just the machine, it was how they made money from it. Just like most companies today have figured out that subscription pricing is more profitable than selling a product or service outright, Xerox was doing that way back in the 70s. Instead of selling their copiers, they leased them, and then they charged for every single copy. Every time someone pressed the copy button, Xerox made a little bit more money. And the more documents people copied, the more the company grew. Back then, before personal computers were even a thing, offices copied everything. Memos, reports, forms, sometimes multiple times just to share information. Paper was the center of how work moved, and Xerox sat right in the middle of it. To them, information wasn't something you moved digitally. It was something you printed, copied, and distributed. Every step of that process had a price attached to it, and when Xerox evaluated new ideas, they weren't just asking if it was useful, but they were asking, does this create more copies? Because that's where the money was, and if anything didn't fit that model, it wasn't profitable. But success has a way of blinding you. While headquarters was counting pennies from paper copies, a few miles away, the future was being born in a lab they barely understood. You see, in the late 1960s, Xerox foresaw a problem. Their core patents were starting to expire, and competitors were catching up. So they decided to look ahead, not just improve their copiers, but to try and figure out what might come next. To do that, they built a new kind of research lab in California. It was called Xerox Palo Alto Research Center, or PARC for short. The idea was to create a place where researchers could think long-term, without worrying about sales, products, or copiers. They had just one goal: figure out what the office of the future might look like. Now, before we go into what they actually built there, you have to understand what computers looked like at that time. They weren't personal. They were gigantic machines in separate rooms. They were owned by universities, governments, and large companies, and you couldn't just sit down and use one. Instead, you submitted work to it. You typed commands into a terminal or fed it stacks of punched cards. What you got back was text, lines of it, not images, layouts, or anything visual. If you wanted to change something, you couldn't click on a button. You rewrote the command and ran it again. Computers weren't intuitive. They were technical systems used by specialists. That was the normal reality of computing in the early 1970s. But inside PARC, they built something completely different. They built a computer called the Alto. They had a screen that you could look at. There were windows, icons, documents laid out visually. You could move a cursor with a mouse, click, open, edit. In the Alto, if you wanted to change a document, you didn't rewrite it. You just changed it directly. And when you printed it, it came out exactly the way it looked on the screen. All this stuff that sounds obvious today, but was groundbreaking at the time. And it didn't stop there. The machines were all connected. Researchers shared files, sent messages, worked across a network. Inside this one lab, people were already doing things that wouldn't become normal for literally decades. And it wasn't experimental. It was how they worked every single day. So now you have two realities inside the same company. At headquarters, Xerox is focused on paper, copies, meters, and a system that's already wildly successful. And at PARC, a small group is building a world where paper starts to matter less, where information moves across screens instead of through copies. Both were going on at the same time inside the same company, and inevitably, they collided. At some point, the work at Park had to be shown to executives because turning it into a real product required their approval. So they brought them in. They demonstrated everything: the screen, the mouse, the documents, and the network. All of it worked, but the reaction wasn't excitement. It was indifference, because the executives there weren't seeing the future. They were seeing a very expensive machine that didn't fit their business. It didn't make copies, and it didn't increase printing. Most importantly, it didn't have a clear way to generate ongoing revenue. There was no meter and no per-use model. There was just a machine people would use without paying Xerox again. From their perspective, this wasn't a breakthrough. It was a risk, and it was something that didn't fit in their system and might even replace it. If people worked on screens, they would wind up making fewer copies. So the company understood the technology, but it wasn't valued until someone else saw it. In 1979, Steve Jobs visited Park. He saw the same exact system, but what he saw was completely different. Not a niche office tool, but the future of personal computing, something that could sit on every desk. So he went back to Apple and started building it as a product. Soon, another company was also paying attention, Microsoft, led by Bill Gates. At first, they were working with Apple, but Gates saw the same shift. Not just a computer, but a new way for people to interact with technology, and more importantly, an opportunity to control the software behind it. In the end, Apple used the Xerox Alto as inspiration for Macintosh, then Microsoft used it for Windows. Later, when Jobs accused Bill Gates of copying him, Gates famously responded that they both stole the idea from the same place, but Jobs just stole it first. The idea for a graphical interface originated from the same place, Xerox. They just implemented it in different ways. It's easy to look at this and think Xerox made a mistake, that they had the future and missed it. But that's not really what happened, because in the 1970s, their decision made sense. They were built around paper. Their entire business depended on people making copies, and it worked. So when they looked at Park, they weren't asking if it was the future. They were asking if it improved what they already had. And the answer wasn't clear at all, because the more people worked on screens, the less they needed Xerox. And this isn't just the Xerox story. This keeps happening in different industries in different decades, but always the same pattern. A company builds an entire business around something that works, and then something new shows up and threatens to replace it. Kodak invented the digital camera, but their entire business was based on film. So for them, fully committing to digital would mean destroying the thing that made them successful. Blockbuster had the chance to buy Netflix, but their money came from physical stores and late fees. Streaming didn't fit that model. BlackBerry saw the iPhone, but their customers valued keyboards, security, and reliability. Touchscreens looked like a downgrade. In each case, the decision wasn't irrational. It was consistent. It protected what already worked. And that's the pattern. The thing that makes a company successful is often the same thing that makes it miss what comes next. So contrary to popular belief, the choice wasn't obvious. It was between protecting something that worked and betting on something uncertain, something expensive, unproven, and easy to dismiss. Inventing the future is one thing, but recognizing it and choosing to build it is something else entirely.